Hi, this is Michelle from The Wealth Within Us. And I just wanted to say that this is my 50th episode. So it's a big milestone for me. I hope you've enjoyed listening and watching to my conversations with so many diverse people. And I hope to bring you even more. And I can't wait for the next 50 episodes. I just want to say thank you for all of your support. I am just so grateful and appreciate each and every one of my listeners and subscribers.
The majority of the clinicians that are trained to treat the mildly depressed middle-aged white male. And so if there's somebody who just kind of follows really classic protocols, they'll do great at treating that person.
I see so many people that are spending so much time with mental health practitioners that aren't getting anywhere.
Exactly.
We're still in the same.
As if they're not the mildly depressed middle-aged white male.
Yes.
And they don't fall in the specific protocols of I do these things. And the thing is, we're all so unique and we're all so different. Some people may respond to biofeedback much better. Some people may prefer somebody who's really highly spiritual and weaving in whatever spiritual tradition, right? If I went to a typical normal mainstream therapist right now, they would tell me that I have a lot of irrational beliefs because I talk to guides, I talk to spirits, I talk about the biofield, right?
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Wealth Within Us. Today, I am honored to have Michele at Luminous Ignis, and she is a Shamanic Intuitive Channel. So thank you so much, Michele, for taking the time to come today onto my channel. I'm very excited to have you share your story.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. So why don't we start right with the name of your business, Luminous Ignis, because I know that has significant meaning for you. So you can tell us about yourself and how you kind of got here and the name of your business. I know that's a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was always a very kind of sensitive child. And I spent a lot of time playing out in nature and talking to the trees. And, I was that kid. And so instead of shutting off intuition like most humans do, because we're all born intuitive.
Right.
I just kind of didn't talk about it. And I kind of thought they were like a whole nother species. But now that I am one, I get it. And so, yeah. So I grew up and I knew that I wanted to help people. Like that was in my heart. And I love animals. Like here's my dog. This is Oliver Wolfgang. He's going to go lay down now.
Have a nice nap, Oliver.
Yes. So loving animals, loving nature, all of that. I wanted to be a healer. And so I did the very natural thing and I got my master's degree in mental health and became a mental health counselor.
Because that's natural. I mean,
Very natural, right? I mean, that's what society says.
Sense. Yeah, but it makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I worked with people for many, many years. I mean, that was 20 years ago-ish at this point, maybe a little more. I'm dating myself. And
me both.
Yes, welcome to my 50s.
The fabulous 50s.
The fabulous 50s, yes. So I did that for years and I just kept feeling like there was more. And so along that journey, I kept taking trainings and I found shamanism as I was on that path. I found like trainings in the intuition and in chakras and in energy healing and became a Reiki master and studying the akashic records and, learning how to kind of tap into that beautiful field and access knowledge that's beneficial for all of us. And then as I was actually finishing up my 2-year like shamanic practitioner training and I was struck by lightning.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did you get struck by lightning? I'm so curious.
I know. Well, actually, it's a very weird thing. I was sitting in my office one day and somebody had just done some shamanic work had just kind of left. And I was sitting there at my computer and all of a sudden this giant storm, and this is the middle of the afternoon, this giant storm comes out of nowhere. There was no storms predicted. It was very strange. And thunder, lightning, it was dark, it was pouring rain, and this tree outside of my office was struck, and off of that tree came a side flare. And it melted the glass on the window. And
Oh my
so there
gosh.
was that almond shape,
Mhm.
which has a lot of, spiritual significance in itself. And it's like the two overlapping circles. And
Wow.
then the lightning came in and struck me in three places in my back. According to my cardiologist, having my hand on the computer mouse, fortunately, I didn't have a wireless one. I had a wired one. Actually, the energy went through my hand, through my arm, into the computer, fried my computer. But
Wow.
that saved my heart.
Ah, okay. So you were able to, because it was almost like you were able to ground that, so to say, or
Yeah,
something.
the electricity of the building was able to
Yeah.
ground.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
Oh,
In many cultures, in many shamanic cultures, they consider being struck by lightning a shamanic initiation. And since we don't have like initiations and mystery schools and things like that that we used to have a long
yeah.
time ago, like when we get the call or we get, you know, an initiation in our lives, which so many of us do all the time, we don't have these rituals that we used to have back in the day. And so this freak storm that came and left very quickly, I knew that that was not just an accident. I knew that
Right.
that was something deeply spiritual.
Yeah.
My
For you.
intuition, yeah, for me, my intuition at that point, like amplified. It cleared all the trauma out of my body, which is a very interesting thing to have happen because I had
Yeah.
a very traumatic childhood and past, and to have that, it was like I was free of all of that baggage. It was a very strange and interesting experience. I mean, I still do my shadow work and all of that, but
Yeah.
it
Was
really,
it more instantaneous that it happened, or did it happen over the course of a few days or weeks?
it happened over the course of a few months. Um,
Okay.
when after I got struck, I couldn't stand hardly to be in my body. Like I was buzzing so much for months after that. And so I would go lay on the ground. Fortunately, it was summer. And that was the only thing that gave me relief was like just being in contact with the earth. And I was grounding myself.
Yeah.
And in that process, during that 3 months of acclimating to the energy that's now in my body all the time, it's just normal. That never really went away. But it helped me acclimate to that. It helped me ground. It helped get out some of that excess that, was just too much for me. And
Right.
I think it was during that process of laying there in connection with the earth and in, prayer and really looking at my spirituality and taking that time to really focus on like what does this mean, what just happened to me, will
Yeah.
I ever get use of my arm again? Like I had a lot of questions that was kind of whirling around my brain, and I think it was more that time than it was like not so much an instantaneous clearing.
Okay. Because well, it sounds like you were kind of almost laid up a little bit from that. Like had to heal physically as well as, taking in all that energy and, as you said, acclimating to it in your body.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I named my business, it became Luminous Ignis because I was, loving the love of the light and the luminosity. And Ignis in Latin is to ignite. It also can mean lightning. So that's kind of where that unusual name came from.
But it's perfect.
It is perfect. I love it. It feels so aligned for me. Yes.
So after you had the incident where you got struck by lightning and all this stuff is happening, then what happened to you in your life? Because it sounded like a lot of things then shifted with your practice, with your mental health practice.
Yeah, a lot of things shifted. I at first I started only seeing empaths. So I kind of shifted my practice to where, well, I'm only going to see empaths. And then I launched Luminous Ignis and kind of had both going. And I
Mm.
still kind of have both going, but I'm just kind of continuing on with people I was already seeing, and I'm not taking any more as I kind of make this full transition
Right.
into, doing intuitive readings and healings and shamanic work and my energy art and all that fun stuff that I do that is now me.
I know it was almost like it zapped you into the true you.
I think it did. I mean, it really, when you have, because my heart had stopped for 3 minutes.
Wow.
And so according to my Fitbit, that's what I'm gauging that on. So maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but my Fitbit stopped tracking me for 3 minutes and then came back online.
Mm.
So during that time, I was unconscious. I was unaware of what was happening. And so I do believe, though it's not one of those like I have this big story, but I do believe I had a near death experience. I do believe I was
Okay.
probably gone for at least a short period of time. What happened during that, I don't know. I'd love
Okay.
to say these, I saw something incredible, but that's not true. So being able to kind of have that had me kind of reevaluating life in a different way. And, it's like I came out of it much kinder, much more loving. I mean, I already was, but just the compassion that I had for people and the desire to help people to heal. And I chose a path of not doing gabapentin and not doing the medications that the doctors were recommending. And
Mhm.
that was my personal choice and my personal journey. I wanted to do everything naturally.
Yes,
And they told
I
me,
agree.
yeah, they told me the amount of time it would take for me to get, the access to my nerves in my arm again. I would probably, be 100 and some years old, and
Wow.
I have use of my
Yeah.
hand. I can make my art again. So, doing a lot of really natural healing things and doing, things like unrefined sea salt and to manage the electricity in my body and
Ooh.
really paying attention to everything health wise that I was putting in my body and chemicals. And I came out of all of this extremely sensitive to anything that isn't natural. So, in that process, I learned a whole lot about functional medicine and natural medicine. And, that knowledge base is really helpful when I'm doing readings now because I have access to the information and the guides can't get me to say something I don't know or understand.
Okay.
So that's they're having to use my database of knowledge and my database of wisdom. So if I don't know a word or I've never heard of something, right, it's like it'll happen sometimes. I'll be trying to describe something and I'm like, I don't know what this is. Like the first time they were trying to tell me about like natural plant minerals and
Mhm.
the trace elements in plant minerals. I couldn't quite understand. I thought they wanted me to eat plant food. And I'm like, that doesn't sound safe.
No, that doesn't sound right.
That doesn't sound right. So fortunately, I had a lot of discernment and I kept asking them. And then they guided me to the product that they were encouraging me to take.
Ah, so
So,
you are using your own channeling to basically on your own healing journey then,
yeah,
which
yeah.
makes sense. Which makes sense. I mean, it's like we're tapping into our own intuition and what's best for me and what's best for me at this time.
What's best for me at this time? That's so right. Like, we get bombarded with, like, do this for your thyroid, do this for your hormones, do this for your gut health. And there's a lot of wealth of amazing information out
Oh
there.
gosh.
But then it's like, how do I find what's right for me right now? What's the
Yeah.
first thing that I need to target for me right now? And sometimes, that's what people will come to me with is like, I've got these 10 things. Which one's first?
Yeah, and I think the body usually heals the most critical issues first. So it's going to guide you there. So those little minor things, those are going to wait.
Yes.
So I was like, no, this needs attention over here.
Right. If I'm not digesting my food, I'm the
Yeah, then
problem.
there's a problem.
Yeah. That's probably a big priority.
Is that what a lot of people come to you for?
People come to me for a variety of things. A lot of it is, health and wellness, but the
Hmm?
biggest thing that I end up getting is people that are kind of awakening and tapping into their gifts and wanting, either like intuitive development. I work with a lot of medical practitioners that are tapping in and really wanting to tap into their medical intuition. And so I do more like one-on-one private so that I can help them tap into what's their gift instead of like just having this general blanket training. So I tend not to do group trainings for that. And then because I was a mental health therapist for so long, I think it's just natural with the guides that I often look at like what is emotionally keeping the person stuck.
Mm.
So I get a lot of that too, where they're like, I don't know why I'm stuck. I don't know what I need to work
Yeah.
on. And so I'll, look at their chakras, I'll look at their energy centers or talk to their guides or their higher self and find out kind of what is kind of keeping that person stuck.
I think a lot of us are kind of there, to be honest.
Mhm.
So I think you can really help a lot of people. I know even myself, sometimes that's where I think we all get, we're like, okay, this thing isn't moving forward in my life. I feel like I'm doing the work. So what's going on? Like what am I missing that I'm not tapping into?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Or people want to know kind of what their gifts are and that kind of thing. And it's like, well, where am I going to focus? Do I want to focus on
yeah.
clairvoyance if clairvoyance is at the bottom of my list of gifts, right? So
Right.
I think that can be really fun to kind of get that information and then kind of learn, okay,
That's
here's
fun.
where I want to invest my energy, where I'm going to get like, the most kind of spiritual activation of like really putting in the effort to develop this gift if it's like one of your primary gifts.
And ultimately help the most people.
For sure. I mean, that's what that's
Yeah.
about, right? Is how can we be of service to ourselves and to others?
Yeah. Because as we do, and I think that sometimes people miss that is that as we're developing ourselves spiritually in any way, even if we're just working on a project or working on releasing trauma or whatever we're doing in our lives, like that trickle over effect benefits everyone around us and even the people that we don't even know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes we'll say something, or you'll say something on your podcast, or one of your guests will, and somebody will hear it, and then they'll tell somebody else that nugget of wisdom or that nugget of information, and it may change their life. And you may never know that you changed these lives like through this chain
I,
effect, which is so cool.
I do love that. And I think sometimes, and I'm speaking for myself as well, is sometimes I can read or hear or encounter the same information over and over again. But
Mhm.
it's like you hear it in another way from somebody else. And all of a sudden, that's when it clicks. It's so weird how it works. It's like,
Mhm.
well, I don't know. I've been hearing that my whole life, but now all of a sudden it clicks.
It does. Yeah. Sometimes we just need to hear it in that different way. Yeah.
Now, is that what you did? You sought out what were your gifts? Like, have you worked with anybody? How were you determining, okay, well, what are my gifts and what am I going to focus on so that I can develop that with full confidence and share that with others?
A lot of them I just thought were natural and everybody had them forever. It was kind of when I got into grad school and I'm talking to my peers more openly, and I'm like, oh, like not everybody really does this because I had kind of just done it without talking about it much. And that was kind of a time where I started to really find my voice and share more. So it was, much older by the time I was like, oh, not everybody does this. So, really recognizing that there was something different. I spent a lot of time actually in meditation and really, in the beginning, didn't do a lot of trainings.
Yeah.
I would do mediumship for fun, like with my friends in grad school. And like, as I started seeing clients, like, all of a sudden, like a grandmother would pop in and try and help with the session. And I'm like, what is this? And, it was basically the perfect training ground for me to develop my gifts. And
It
that was my
really was.
primary teacher was the incredible clients that came to me because I would hear the question I needed to ask in my head from the guides, and I would ask the question and it would be spot on. Or I would tell them, well, you know this about yourself. And I didn't know that. And they would be like, yeah, how'd you know that? Or I would give examples of something and it would be exactly like I remember this one lady who I was like, oh, and like maybe, finding a man that looks like Antonio Banderas. And she's like, how did you know I love him?
Well,
So
geez, if we could all come to you for that.
it was fun. And it was this perfect training ground for me to get the validation
Yes.
that we all need. Like when we're tapping into intuition, because sometimes we're
Mhm.
tapping into imagination, and imagination is
Mhm.
wonderful and amazing, but it's not intuition.
Right.
And so it's a path too. Like your energy, if you don't mind, like your sacral chakra is like so open today. Like I can't help but notice as we're on this call. And that has to do with creativity.
Mm.
And you're doing a lot of these creative things, which is really making that energy kind of vibrate. And, chakra means wheel. So it's just like spinning like this beautiful wheel, tapping into all of these creative things. And so it's like so big, it's almost singing right now.
Because I love doing this. So this is
Yeah,
really one of my passions. I love talking to people. I love finding out your story and how we can all help everybody else, really.
absolutely.
I do love that. And I think one of the things that I wanted to mention is, and I wanted to ask your opinion on is, I feel like mental health is very much top of mind, very much in the front of people right now. And I think as a collective, not just as a collective, like not just individual, but people everywhere, I think we're dealing with a lot of trauma. And
Mhm.
I feel that we're all dealing with trauma from generational trauma, from our
Mhm.
own trauma. And I would even say the trauma of from 2020
Mhm.
and that whole thing that went on. I think everybody's got some trauma around that. And I know it was just an election here in the United States. And I'm not saying that all these things are traumatic events to everybody, but I think we all have some sort of trauma from any of them. And it doesn't matter what your stance on any of the issues were. I think
For sure.
collectively we've suffered a little bit of trauma, just
Yeah.
being silenced and the censorship and all the things that have gone on. So I
Mhm.
think that how how do you feel that collectively we can sort of release this trauma? And I actually have a lot of questions, but I'll start with that one. Like I could
So,
pile a
yeah.
whole load on right now, but I'm like, look, let me stop there.
You're piling on the question. I mean, that's a big question. How many hours do you got? No,
I
but
know, I know, I know, but but I think it's really important that we heal
it
this
is.
trauma, and I think that this time,
Yes.
and I don't know if you can feel it, but I think even I can feel it. I think a lot of us are doing the work, whether we're conscious of that work or we're unconscious of that work. But I think we're doing the work.
The work is so important. And that's the thing is, and it all starts with ourselves, right? And
Right.
we can be a healer while we're on the healing journey. The healing healer is the one I'd rather go to because they're on the healing journey.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, for sure. So, but when we are paying attention to um, the parts of ourselves, right?
Hmm.
So we all have different parts of ourselves. Like the Inside Out cartoon Pixar movies are the best description of what it's like to be human.
I love
Uh,
that movie.
it is great. And so when I'm doing readings, a lot of times I'm reading people's parts.
Mm,
The parts make up the whole of us, right? And so when we
right.
have a wound or we have a trauma and it's not healed, what happens is one, the body encapsulates neuropeptides. There's an actual chemical thing happening. That's why you get a massage or you do trauma healing work. And whether it's a mental health therapist, a massage therapist, they say drink water because we want to flush out those
Okay.
neuropeptides. So take that seriously, like really drink the water afterwards. If you're doing a therapy session and your therapist doesn't know to tell you to drink water after you've done that, drink water. The other thing is to pay attention to those parts. So here's one of the biggest healing things that can happen for our trauma is if we can become the observer of our thoughts.
Mm,
When we become the observer of our thoughts, that is one of the most powerful things we can do to begin to notice that's not all of me that is acting that way or made that choice. That's a part of me. And that part of me is 13 years old. And that part of me is still from this developmental place acting out as if I'm encapsulated in that time. And maybe there was some sort of like break up with a boyfriend at that time and all the friends, mean girled on the
Oh,
person
yeah. Yeah.
or those things happen. And then that part just stops in time. And when we want to be that healthy whole human, it's like if you want to get to the fifth dimension, like your little universe inside of you has got to elevate to that higher frequency, which means you're healing all of those parts of yourself so that they can join the higher self, right? Into moving up into that higher vibration and that higher energy. So when we're doing the trauma work, we're doing our shadow work, we're healing the unhealed parts of ourselves, then that part can kind of find a new job and that part can integrate into being one of your really healthy, high functioning, helps you navigate life, helps you make really good choices for yourself, whatever those are, helps you with the wounds. So when we have a wound like
Mhm.
COVID, personally, I am an introvert and I love to be alone. And I'm good talking to animals and trees and a few friends on the phone or Zoom. COVID was fine for me. My job went on. I was fortunate that I work online. And so I didn't have the negative impact a lot of people did. I have a ton of compassion for those who do. And I sat with a lot of people that did, especially extroverts and people that had never had anxiety before in their life, but it stirred it up. And that's the
Yeah.
thing about this time that we're living in is on one hand, people are like, the world is burning. And like, well, when the forest burns, what happens? New growth comes, right?
Yeah.
Our education systems aren't set up for the upgraded human model that's being born on the planet for the last 12 years. Like, we have to, and they're acting out and they're having behavior issues. So we see that burning. We see, you know, depending on somebody's politics, whatever direction they go, they see the other side burning things
Yeah.
down. So that duality we've got to get out of and move more
Right.
into unity and harmony of finding the places where we're all way more alike than we are different. And when we have the intention of, I want to heal myself and I want to be kind to others, I want to help others, I can give grace for that was a part of them, not all of them, that
Yeah.
was just mean to me or unkind to me or told my secret or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, when we can really become the observer not only of our own parts, then we start to become the observer of other people's parts. And that we can have a lot more compassion for because we can kind of see, oh, I remember being there. Right?
Yeah.
Kind of like the analogy I like to use is when we watch a 2-year old or 1-year old learning to walk. Walking is so hard. Like that whole concept of baby steps. Like when people first said, oh, baby steps, I'm like, yeah, baby steps. Okay, this is easy. No, baby steps are hard. Like if you ever watch a human learn how to
Yeah.
walk, like it's this wobbly and this standy and they fall down, right? And we're doing that with so many of our parts when we're doing the work. And when we can heal those individual parts and they can shift their job, then we heal our trauma. And we're healing the source and not the symptom. Because the symptom is essentially just a really natural reaction to a really unnatural event.
Yeah. So it's almost like the root of whatever is bringing out that trauma. And I also feel like, how do you feel about sometimes when I look at things that happen, like I kind of agree with you, like COVID wasn't as bad for me, but I think we suffered trauma from, I think for me, it was like the censorship and the lies and all that stuff was like, I think
Yeah.
what we all kind of dealt with. But I also like look for sort of the blessing in it. And I think the blessing in it was it woke so many people up. Like
It
had
did.
that not have happened, where would we have been? Even just with silly things. And it was funny because when we're recording this right now, we're coming up upon Thanksgiving in a short time period here in the United States. And I remember for several years it was kind of getting ridiculous where, and I'm just using this as an example, where people were working and businesses were open and it was all this kind of stuff. And now most businesses since then have shut down and they haven't reopened on these
Yeah.
holidays. So I
Yeah.
think also looking at, what good came out of this that needed to come out? And I guess that's the shadow work, right?
It's the shadow work, but it's also being a human being instead of a
Mhm.
human doing. Right. When we got the time during that, a lot of us, just like I had the time after the lightning strike laying on the earth, like
Yeah.
when we get that time to really be with ourselves and be present and get to know ourselves and pay attention and notice I'm having thoughts, I'm experiencing life in a physical body. That's a beautiful gift
Yeah.
of being more self-aware, more compassionate for yourself, more
Yeah.
compassionate for others. Yeah.
And more discerning, like you had said earlier, too. And I think that's what
Yeah.
we're sort of getting back in touch with. We're not just taking things at face value. We're using much, much more discernment. At least I feel that a lot of people are.
A lot of people are. And there's, I see a lot of more disillusionment on the planet. Like
Yes.
finding out the one for me that really kind of like ingrained this in me of understanding that, I have to question everything was when I found out, the BMI charts were created by an insurance company and it's not actually a medical tool, but still used as a medical tool.
Right.
That more,
And there's so much of that. Yeah.
there's so much of that, right? But that was the one, right? That was the one that sparked this fire in me that I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
There's so much I need to start paying attention to. I can't just trust that,
Right. Yeah. It's like,
and
well,
I think
why does the food pyramid change all the time? Well, it depends on
yeah,
which hobbyist is putting the most money to get their stuff.
right.
I
I
mean,
mean,
it's,
it's the
yeah, it's
same thing,
crazy.
right? There's all of these agendas,
Hmm.
like trauma, like PTSD,
Yeah.
for example, in the DSM, in the Diagnostic Criteria Manual,
Mhm.
you can't qualify for PTSD if you got it from virtual reality. And that's actually written in
Oh,
there. And
interesting.
that had to do with who got to be on the board when the diagnostic criteria was getting finalized. So, I mean, there are these things that if we pay attention, it's like, wait a minute, like what's really going on? Like I really got to pay attention to everything and question everything. But that's a gift because
Yes.
when I'm an observer, again, this goes back to if I'm that observer of self and
Hmm.
I'm that observer of the parts of me and the observer of my environment, and I'm questioning, what do I think of that? I don't just watch
Yeah.
one channel or one news source and say, okay, this is everything I believe. I'm looking at all kinds of different things and looking at, okay, what feels like the truth here?
Yeah.
It's hard to find truth sometimes.
It can be for sure.
Yeah.
And I guess that's part of like what you said, that's part of the being part of things. Because otherwise, you're not really being, you're almost repeating. You're repeating
Yeah.
what someone else's thoughts are, what something was programmed into you, even as far back as when we were younger, because, technically we've been programmed our entire lives. So,
Like sit still. Sit
yeah,
still
yeah,
is an
still.
early
Yeah.
one. No, don't sit still. Like the person that's sitting still, I'm terrified for them, right? And what I
Yeah.
see energetically, because I can see people's aura and energy field, is what happens is if they're sitting still, they're not only contracting their muscles,
Mhm.
right? They're not only contracting their pelvic floor and creating issues there, but they're contracting their energy field, almost like saran wrap on the body. And
Oh,
that makes it really hard to read anything because when my aura and my energy field, or in the medical community known as the biofield, right, that electromagnetic field that is measurable by scientific instruments, that's how MRIs work, it's how CAT scans work. If that's nice and big, I'm reading the energy of the people that are coming into the field. I'm much more discerning of what's happening. So when I can keep my field clear and clean, and I'm doing, my clearing work, and I'm bringing in divine light, and I'm like maintaining my energetic boundaries and my aura and my biofield, then I'm much more discerning of truth versus a lie. And it's harder to manipulate the people that are in that space. Um, because, again, we're told to sit still and we need to move energy through our body.
yeah.
I've always admired the hearing impaired because it's like they're teaching me the noises we would naturally make if we hadn't been conditioned and told we need to be quiet.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
So we're supposed to be noisy and wiggly and moving and keeping our energy
Yeah,
flowing.
that
You
makes
think about,
so much sense. Because otherwise it's
yeah,
almost like you're not expanding or growing and
mhm,
you're kind of stuck. Like we were saying, either you're almost stuck in this paralysis of
yeah.
certainly not being.
Well, it becomes the stagnation of doing and the
Yeah,
stagnation of energy. And then there's no discernment. And it's
right.
just, okay, wake up, brush teeth. We have 90% of people, the average human's thoughts is the same exact ones they had the day before. And part of being somebody that really can think for themselves is being somebody who breaks up that 90%, that's asking questions, curiosity. Curiosity is so key to healing. If I'm curious about things, right? Like you're so curious about people. And I love the name of your podcast, The Wealth Within Us, right? That wealth of knowledge that we each carry and we can share with each other. And that makes when people are listening to this, there's things that you say or I say that strikes an original thought for them. And
Mhm.
so that's listening to this is breaking them out of that 90% and shifting their percentage for the day.
Or even just questioning a
Mhm.
thought that they were programmed with,
Yeah.
that they're now questioning, and the other part of my question too that I was kind of thinking of back before when I had the long thing, is I think that people really need to be open and understand that there's not one way if they're struggling with their mental health, as even that in and of itself has kind of like become this sort of
Mhm.
diagnostically catch all for, I think, a lot, probably way too much, but that there's more than one way to nurture your mental health. It's
Mhm.
not just about going to, I kind of use the example of my mom. My mom went to a psychologist, had been seeing a therapist psychologist for, oh my gosh, probably since I was pretty young. And
Mhm.
and she just recently passed. So I honestly, she was almost no different from when she started going back in her maybe late 20s or something like that to the date that she passed at almost at age 80. So I think it
Yeah,
was that.
everyone needs something different. The majority of the clinicians that are trained to treat the mildly depressed middle-aged white male.
Okay.
And so if there's somebody who just kind of follows really classic protocols, they'll do great at treating that person.
But
But
because I don't, and I guess that's my point. Like I see so many people that are spending so much time with mental health practitioners that aren't getting anywhere. Like we're kind of
exactly,
still, we're
exactly.
still in the
Because
same
if
place
they're
that
not the
we
mildly
were.
depressed middle-aged white male,
Yes.
and they don't fall in the specific protocols of I do these things. And the
Okay.
thing is, we're all so unique and we're all so different. Some people
Very
may
much.
respond to biofeedback much better. Some people may prefer somebody who's really highly spiritual and weaving in whatever spiritual tradition um, that's really beneficial for them. Some may really benefit from a lot more hypnosis sessions or talking about things in a very different way, right? If I went to a typical normal
Mhm.
mainstream therapist right now, they would tell me that I have a lot of irrational beliefs because I talk to guides, I talk to
Right.
spirits, I talk about the biofield, right? Like a lot of the things that I talk
Yeah. Well,
about.
for me, like that's normal stuff. Not normal, but like it's like normal. It's becoming in everybody's normal, or at least in my path. That's becoming part of my normal path.
Yes. So as we kind of expand and more people open up their minds, we need more therapists that are trained for that. And I'm glad that like things like energy psychology have come along that are really incorporating chakras and incorporating EFT and tapping and getting into the meridians and releasing trauma. And so yeah, there's no one size fits all therapy.
Right.
And if somebody is going to a therapist or an energy healer or a practitioner and they're not getting the results that they want, there's the balance of I've got to stick with it to make it work, but there's also the balance of maybe this isn't the right thing for me. And really kind of researching like, do they want somebody that specializes in parts work, for example? Um,
Yeah.
that they can really sit with and do that deep shadow work and work with their parts. And, so everybody's different and everybody's going to
Yeah.
respond to something different. And the thing that used to always confuse my interns when I was training them, and I would let them sit in on therapy sessions from time to time just to kind of observe, and
Mhm.
is they couldn't understand how I was a completely different therapist each hour because I was adjusting and adapting to
Yeah.
what I
That person.
intuitively knew that person needs.
Yeah.
So, I love being able to
Yeah.
train young therapists now and teach them here's how you use your intuition, here's how you tap into your gifts and use that to help people heal.
Yeah. And I mean, even to further sort of go with that, I think it's a lot like parenting too. I have twins and I have a boy and a girl. So twins, they're a boy and a girl. And I didn't like when it came to correction or discipline or that type of thing, I had to handle my daughter in a totally different way than I had to manage my son.
Uh-huh.
They were
Yeah.
two different kids, twins,
Yes.
born 4 minutes apart, but they were both so different that if I said one thing to my daughter, it would not maybe necessarily go over the same way with my son. And I think anybody with kids would see that. And especially if you're a teacher, you can't teach. And that's why the education system is so broken because it
Yeah.
puts everybody in this little box that like, well, I've got this one thing and I don't know, maybe it's a timeout, but that timeout works for everybody. And it's
No.
like it doesn't work for everybody. And
Mhm.
and like you said, with treating your patients, it's the same thing. Like not everybody needs the same thing. And not
Mhm.
every conversation I have with somebody has the same, it's not going to flow the exact same thing.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And when we can kind of really see each other as individuals and
Hmm.
we can get education as for who we are,
Yeah.
right? We can get therapy for who we are. We can get psychic readings for who we are. Right?
Yeah.
Because even that, like it can't always be the same exact thing because
Hmm.
everybody needs something different
Yeah.
shamanically. Maybe, you know, they need one thing but my protocol is this. Well, that's not going to work. I'm not going to be
Yeah.
very effective. So absolutely, we've got to, that's part of the, we can hold two truths. Two truths can be this true at the same time. 10 truths can be the same,
Yeah.
true at the same time. And we tend to live in a society, in a world that's taught us and tried to box us in. And unless it's like a catheter, there's one way to put in a catheter. For most things, there's a lot of different ways that it can be done, and giving people the grace to be themselves and figure out who they are in the
Yeah.
beingness so that they can get the support that they need to heal their individual trauma and whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's one of the things that over the years our society has taught us is to stuff down who you think you are and not be that no matter where it is, or shove these gifts down that maybe seem a little weird to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I absolutely love that. The other thing I wanted to touch on still on the trauma thing, because I think trauma is such a big thing right now. And I feel that it's also that this generational trauma that we've been carrying with us for I don't even know how many generations. I mean, if you at least go back in recorded time, there was some pretty crappy, not so nice times. And now here we are where we are now, and we're still an accumulation of all of those times. So I feel that part of what we're doing on the planet right now is also healing all this generational trauma, not to just free ourselves, but to free those souls that
Mhm.
passed down from it. So I'm curious to see how that,
Absolutely.
your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. And I think we're seeing that more and more. Like we're becoming, I love it because there's this increased awareness, right? And
Mhm.
and I think some of it kind of even started in the medical community of being able to be like, well, maybe this is in your genes, maybe it's not. And then we learned about epigenetics, and then right there became this shift of
Yes.
like, well, maybe it's because that's how a family trained you to eat, and that's why we all have diabetes. So being able to look at those things is really making people think in a different way, and kind of I think as we're kind of growing and energetically, I think we're raising our vibration as a collective, whether we want to or not.
I
That
agree.
is tapping into these things go back multi generations, and I I've witnessed in myself when I've done my own healing, I'm watching that ripple out through the generations. And in shamanism, one of the things that we look at is the person's tapestry. And the tapestry can go back, hundreds of generations of
Yeah.
finding that thing, right? That one grandmother that got killed so she couldn't heal this thing. And then it kind of came through the lineage. And so as we're doing this healing in ourselves, it is about also doing that generational healing, that ancestral healing. Like I had this obsession of I had to always have potatoes in the house. Seriously. And I was like, what is this about? Like, if there was not edible potatoes in the house, I would freak out. And, I don't have much Irish in me, but for whatever reason, like some of that must have transferred through. And I had to heal that to where now I'm fine not having potatoes in the house. But it was like a real panic I would feel.
Yeah, it was
And
and it was probably like a starvation thing or something, like, oh my gosh, like there when food was a scarcity.
well, what it ended up being was one of my great, 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 great
Hmm.
something grandmothers had made a vow that no one in her family line would ever go hungry again
Oh,
and that they would always have plenty of food. And so I was overeating. I was, right, I couldn't. And so that's what I was trying to figure out. Why am I obsessed with potatoes and why am I overeating? And
mm,
it was this loving vow, which ended up becoming a curse through this family lineage. And then all of a
yeah,
sudden, all of these women were struggling with weight. And so, even the most loving vow sometimes that can be made
huh.
by a grandmother or a mother's heart, right? That wanted good and, is saying
Mhm.
that holding a potato, right? I got the visual of her, right, saying this prayer with this potato. And so being very sensitive, I was feeling that and panicking. So when we start to kind of look at that, like which is why I feel intuition is so important and sometimes our own healing. I couldn't have figured that out. There isn't any amount
Yeah,
of mental health therapy about this present lifetime that I could have done that would have helped me figure out this is
yeah.
why I'm overeating. And it ended up being something that was meant out of love.
And I think that's where the individualism comes in too, because somebody else that could have the same symptoms, so to say, if they always had to have potatoes or whatever, it could be from
Yeah.
something totally different, or even just a symptom of like, why am I overeating?
Yeah.
It's not always going to be that your grandmother made a vow over a potato. So,
Exactly. And that's that, individualization in
yeah.
individualized treatment, individualized care. Like, why am I doing this?
Mhm.
Right. And
Or
that's
what's
why
been
one
neat.
size fits all treatment for trauma and the things that we do doesn't work is because who would have guessed? Like, how do you
Right.
that up? Like, that's what I found is why I was doing that. Like, so yes, it could be from this incarnation. Sometimes it's past life
That was
stuff.
my next question. I was like, well, so I
Yeah.
would assume the same thing goes to our past lives that, and I
Uh-huh.
still wrap my head around it. It's like, are we living them multiply all at once?
Mhm.
Are they really in the past? I mean, I kind of am on board with the theory that we are living them simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the what the third and the fourth dimension is, right, is it's time. And
Mm,
we need linear time as we're in a physical density body. And so for us, we can't imagine being out of time. But when we get into the fourth dimension, which is where the earth kind of is now, and a lot of people are kind of moving into that fourth dimensional energy, that's time. And so we see all these glitches and people keep talking about glitches. Well, you're
yeah.
coming from 4D. Welcome to the glitches, right? Because time is beginning to break down.
Mm,
Because in the divine, you know, everything is right now. The past life, present life, right? Our ancestors, 30,000 years ago that were focused on us and us now that are focused on learning from them. Um, that's all happening simultaneously, which is why we have access. If I access the Akashic records and time actually existed, I don't know how I would do that because
yeah.
then I can get that life because it's all happening right now. So that field of knowledge that we all have access to is because everything is here and now. And so past lives, present lives, future lives, parallel lives, all of that can affect us when, healing, we've talked a lot about generational healing. The new thing people are talking about now is like healing through all of your lifetime, sending that healing, forward and backwards from our perspective. And again, we're not wrong when we have that perspective. It's our perspective because we live in a linear time space. But, when we're like, okay, there's linear time, there's vertical time, there's no time, all three are true at the same time. So, we do that healing in all of these different ways. And yeah, what comes up? Why am I, wanting potatoes in my house? It could have been another life. It could have been a vow. It could have been my star family. I'm not from here. So, there are people that keep incarnating on Earth and this is their playground. And then there are those that have been, personally, I'm a traveler. I've been a lot of different places. I've incarnated in a lot of different star systems, which gives me access to beautiful star families.
Yes.
And that doesn't really carry trauma because they're pretty high vibrational. But like Lyrans, for example, often will carry some trauma from the Lyran Wars, or and that can kind of come through sometimes as some collective trauma or individualized trauma. I know there was some Atlantean trauma that played into, COVID trauma. And so there's a lot of different things that kind of can intersect and cause why am I having trauma that may not seem the logical path we have always been taught.
I'm almost picturing because I very much resonated with that movie Inside Out, like that whole thing with all the balls, and then it's like you come across this thing that triggers, and all of a sudden this encapsulated thing just whoop, like pops up.
Yes.
It's like I'm ready.
Yes.
I'm ready to be healed now. Come on.
Yes. And that movie is, yes, the best example ever.
I do.
Brilliant.
I've talked about that movie plenty of times. It's such a great metaphor for a lot of different things. So, like when we're talking about these generational traumas and these multi-life traumas, do you think that maybe we're trying to heal all those like to get to the next dimension? It's like, do we have to heal all these? And almost like I kind of look at it like this paper doll. This is like how I visualize it. I visualize that all these paper dolls, and then they're all out, and then we're trying to get it to like where it's flat. You know what I mean? Like where it's whole again. I don't know. That's just how I sort of figure it out. Like in my head, that's how I see it.
I love that. Yeah. I can tell you my truth. And that may not be your truth, and that's okay.
No, I think we're all figuring it out. So
we're all figuring it out. And so I'm curious. I'm so curious. And I'm always asking the guides questions because I want to know these things.
Yes.
And so really kind of tapping into what is this? That some of that kind of plays into kind of that concept of the new earth. And not that there's going to be like some big, like half the people disappear from the planet all of a sudden. But what they've shown me is that the people who want to keep going with this higher vibration will keep incarnating here. And we see that with this younger generation, which is why schools don't work for them. Right. And the people who are like, no, I still want to play out some of these other energies, which is fine. No judgment in that, right? Like if they still want to play some of that out, then they go somewhere else when they reincarnate. So it's kind of going to be this gradual thing, but it's already happening, right? In the last 12 years, we're getting those ones that are incarnating, and just the ones that want to be in this higher vibration and not the ones that don't. And so if you follow that path,
right,
we fast forward 50 years, look how different of a planet we would have. And yeah, they'd have to break some of that collective trauma and those collective beliefs and heal a lot of that. But they're going to be a lot more suited for that if their soul chose, I want to incarnate into this higher vibration. And we've all played around with different things, right? When I wanted to find out why I have to like protect women and I want to empower women. And it's so important for me to empower women to find their voice and to be strong and to like find their light, and that we can all shine brightly, and that's okay. There's room for all of us. I couldn't figure out, why is this so important to me? Well, then I go look at my past lives, and I have this one past life I'm not proud of. I'm gonna call it past, even though it's all happening right now.
Yeah.
Right. Where I was this warrior, and I was not a nice man. I was a chauvinistic pig. I then reincarnated into my soul made a choice of I want to clean that up. I then reincarnated into a lifetime where I experienced everything that I had done and then gradually kind of got back to being much higher dimensional version of me that is now this. But the reason that I feel so strongly, right, and that I get so passionate is because of that. So we've all made different choices in different
Right.
lifetimes. So we can, if I know I've been every color, if I know I've been every gender, if I know I've been other places, if I know I've played the villain and I've played the hero, then how would I ever judge another?
Yeah.
How would I ever see another as less than? Right? How would I look at somebody and say, oh, you're bad, you represent bad? And we do that all the time. We point
Yeah.
fingers and we say, oh, you're bad. And it's like, oh, your soul is choosing in this incarnation to express in this way. I may not choose to align with that. I may not choose to want to have anything to do with that, but I can honor and respect that that's that soul's choice. And so there's no more judgment then, right?
Yeah.
We're the human race, and it doesn't matter what we are. It matters more how am I choosing to express myself in this incarnation.
Yeah. And especially if you look at it from that angle, it's like, well, I've already stepped in those shoes before. I've already been in that other
Yeah,
person's shoes because whether you're aware of it or not, like you've already kind of been there. So
yeah.
do you think that like, do you think that we're taking all these past lives with us? Like, do some get left behind or are we like all going as one? Does that make sense? Like, if we're creating this, because I kind of have so many different swirling thoughts about, like simulation theory and the timelines and the new earth and the breaking off. And, like,
Yeah.
whereas maybe this will still exist at this lower density, it's just us moving up to a higher density. I'd love your thoughts around that because I think there's a lot of things going on around that I don't think, obviously we're all guessing to a certain extent, although we can tap in, like you said, to our higher selves. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think of that tapestry I was talking about before, right? If I'm
Okay,
healing
yeah.
myself in this incarnation, I'm healing the others, right? Me empowering women is part of me healing that aspect of me that was a chauvinist, right? Like me doing these things, like it all becomes an essential part of me. So if we look at our soul, and I saw my soul one time, I've only got to see it once. It was the most powerful thing. It was like I could see in 360. It was the most vibrant colors, and
Wow.
I was light. I wasn't dense. I had no body. It was just
Yeah.
light. And so, if that's who we truly are, then that explains why it's like, well, is this a hologram?
Hmm.
Well, yeah, a really advanced one where we can
Yeah.
touch and feel our body and feel the
Yeah. And
density.
things appear solid.
We appear solid, and fascia research is teaching us that we're just like a
Yeah.
tiny little bump of something, and that's like holding us. So yeah, that's a matrix, right? So like,
Right.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
a really
The
cool
mathematical
hologram.
equation.
Yeah, there's the hologram, right? There's how I become a solid hologram. But when we look at those things, we're learning that all of our incarnations are important because it's teaching us information. So it's kind of like we look at, you and I are in our 50s and we look back to our 20s and some of our choices, and it's like, oh,
Yeah. Some of them were not so good.
I was a victim of my development at that stage, right? So I made some choices that it's like, oh, I wouldn't do that now.
No, no.
But that I think it's the same thing as we look at different lifetimes, right? It's like the ones that maybe we're not proud of, we can learn from and grow from, and it becomes knowledge for our soul. So that being of
Yeah.
us that is this pure light and beauty and connected to the divine, to the source, whatever you believe in, is it's like a projection. Like, and
Mm,
I'm having this experience and I'm sitting here now, and this feels like everything because this is where my consciousness is focused right now.
yeah, I do. I love that because I often wonder, like, I'm probably a lot like you. Like, I'll just sit here sometimes and just think of all these questions and like so much. I just want the answers. Like, I don't want to go through the work. I just want you to just tell me. Like just tell me because I just want to know.
Yeah. And I love being able to ask all of these questions. So if you ask me something I haven't asked before, I'll tap in and find out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, now you put me on the spot, but yeah, I mean, there's just so many questions of like, well, like how did we get here? What is true? What isn't true? Like, what, I guess sometimes I ask, like we all, if you look at this world as it is right now, and it seems so divided, or it seems like, and sometimes it feels like, okay, well, we talked about the education system, right? Or even the medical system. Well, like it was designed that way for a reason. Was it designed that way for our benefit to keep us down from who we really are? Like, is there really a concerted effort? I kind of go back and forth. I'm like, I go back and forth between, is it a concerted effort from maybe not even beings, but something else that's trying to stifle us from awakening, and I often call it remembering, like from remembering who we truly are? Or is
Yeah.
that the point of being here? You know what I mean?
Well, the remembering, and
Yeah.
again, it's those things that multiple truths are true at the same time. And so if you ask one channel that channels this group and another channel that
Right.
channels this group, because kind of the truth of how we got here is a multi-layered truth, right? We know that there
Yeah.
are people with a lot of Neanderthal
Mhm.
DNA that we found now, right? And so we know
Yeah.
there's different kinds of humans, and we are all one human race, but different genetic things came in that made us look slightly different, which is where we're kind of calling it some of the races. There's what's his name? Greg Braden.
Oh yeah.
He does a really great job of kind of talking about the geology and like how
Mhm.
like we're progressing, and then all of a sudden, what we are jumps from that to this, and like this time that's not possible. So we can see where there was like we have evidence of that in
Yeah.
geology. We can see that there was something that got manipulated. The
Mhm.
by whom ends up being a multi-layered truth, because in this area of the world it was this group, and in this area of the world it was this group. And I think that's why we end up with these versions of stories that go from we were
Yeah.
slaves of the Anunnaki to
Mhm.
this very loving race of beings created us, or it's because there's all of these different levels of truth, because different things were happening in different places on the planet.
Almost simultaneously, it sounds.
Yeah. I mean, from our perspective, yeah, but I mean, hundreds of years is nothing in the big picture.
I know. It is so interesting because I, like you, like I do fully believe that probably from some other, galaxy at some point or wherever. And, I've done a little bit of research into that, and that may sound, kooky to some people, but I definitely agree with you. I don't think most of us probably started out here.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a big group that this is their home and this is where they keep
Yeah.
reincarnating. And they're a lot younger souls because Earth is a much younger planet,
Mm,
still thousands and thousands of years old.
right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a less than in any way. It's just kind of where they are in their development. Just like we don't make fun of a toddler for learning how to walk,
Yeah.
right?
For falling down when they
If
are.
you're older, you're older. It just you got more practice. And
Yeah.
so that's really all that is, and having that kind of wandering, and you have a very kind of Andromedan energy. So like you probably have some incarnations in that area, and they tend to be incredibly curious and ask, big questions. Andromedan stars
Yeah.
seem to do. So yeah, I mean there's all of these things that become that multi-layered answer, right? Where did my genetic line come from? Where did my soul come from? And there's so many different things that kind of thread together to create your individual
Yeah.
truth.
Almost to knit who we are right now,
Mhm.
so to
Yeah,
say.
I do this because that's how I see the energy. It's like coming in all
Yeah.
these different
And,
points
and
and getting.
sometimes I feel like, because this other question that I have is that, well, if I'm living all of these multi, parallel past, present lives at once, then why am I only aware of this one? I mean, I have my own thoughts on it. I don't know if I'd be curious, because I don't think that's something that I've really ever heard anybody talking about. It's like, why am I only present of this conversation that we're having right now? Why am I only aware of this? I really, maybe in my dreams, I don't know. My dreams can sometimes be very kooky, but I am a
Yeah.
very, very vivid dreamer. But like,
Yeah.
why do you
That
think that
might
we're
be more
only,
real than this. Yeah.
well,
And
they're pretty
if you
weird.
decide to play this really cool game where you forget who you are, you
Mm,
forget all the magnificence of
yeah,
everything you are and
yeah,
everything that you've done and go all the way down to the third density. But in exchange, you get to experience what it's like to be in a physically dense body. You get to experience what it's like to have an orgasm. You get to experience what it's like to eat chocolate. You
yeah,
get to have relationships and you get to try and remember who and what you are.
yeah. Then why do
Like,
you
what a
think there's so
fun
much
game.
suffering? Do we bring across the suffering? I mean, I
I
mean,
think
if
that
you
gets
look at them,
into the whole free will discussion, right?
right,
So
right.
it's like a book came out recently that's talking about, oh, we have no free will. And so free will has been kind of a hot topic lately. And the truth
Uh,
is do I have free will? Yes and no. Like both are true.
yeah.
Yes, my higher self made a plan for me. And if my higher self made a plan for me to be born into a family where I had trauma, that really made me go and talk to the trees and talk to the earth
Mm,
and not trust adults, which all ended up being a beautiful, wonderful, perfect part of my story so that I never shut off my abilities or my gifts.
mhm,
Right? Had I not had that trauma, would I be who I am? Probably
yeah.
not. Would I have tapped into, would I have remembered who and what I am? No, I don't think I would have. So my higher self chose that for me and chose here's the parameters, right?
Yeah.
And so like here's the hallway, right?
Mm,
And then I can come down that hallway and I can do whatever I want in it. I can remember who I am, I can not, I can turn into a complete asshole, or I can be a loving, kind presence on this planet.
uh,
I want to keep doing that because I want to keep my vibration high. I want to go back. I want to complete my mission of remembering who I am and not having like, oh, now I got to go clean all that up. Right.
yes, yes.
There is a
Yeah.
cost to me being a
Yes.
chauvinist in that past life. There was a cost to that and a price that I paid, but a deep learning that I now have soul knowledge of that's so important. So, like, if that's why that ties into do we have free will or not? Yes and
Yeah.
no, because, but it's still us. Our higher self is still us that's
Yeah.
setting those parameters. So if you're going to choose, I'm going to forget everything that I am, I would want guardrails. I would want the
Yes.
things that set me up to be successful to try and remember if I'm going to play this game. Right. And I think that's why
Huh,
we often talk about this life as a game, or people, video games are more
agreed.
modeled after what we're doing. But thank gosh, there's parameters in there.
No, I do. I actually really agree with you. I always feel like, well, we have free will, but within the confines of
Yeah.
whatever box was set up for us to have confines in.
Yeah. And so as we evolve on this planet, right, I think the earth is raising her vibrations, and those who choose to incarnate here will have to be in soul alignment with wanting to live in that higher vibration. Then we get to the point eventually, much like the Pleiadians have, where you don't have to have trauma to know that because you're born knowing more of who you are. And so we have to have that when we're trying to remember, when we're playing that game?
Mhm.
A lot do, not everyone. There's different ways of remembering for sure, not just trauma, but trauma tends to be like the most popular one that gets picked by higher selves.
Yeah, definitely. And then we have to do all the work or get struck by lightning. There's that.
It's struck by lightning. Where I still had to do the work, but I'm
We still
still
have
doing
to
it.
do the work. I know, because it's funny, and I'll say it to my sister. I'm like, yeah, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back here. I have no desire to come back to this place again. So whatever I need to do, I'm just doing it.
I mean, you say that now, but then
Yeah.
you're up there and it's all like peaceful love and light, and you're like, I could go for some chocolate and
Yeah.
go for
Go
like
for it.
a physical density. I can
Yeah.
feel for being in a body. Like, so you never really know what and you don't have to decide that from this perspective,
Right.
right? So I think it's easy to say that sometimes, but I think
Yeah.
that robs us from the experience. So I think that in itself
Yeah.
becomes a trauma. And I had to work a lot on this trauma of my biggest trauma is being in a body.
Mm.
In that I'm not used to being in a body. That's not a density. Yes, I've done it and I've tried out many incarnations where I've done it, but
Yeah.
it's not my normal state of being. And so being in a body has been very hard, and being in this density has been very hard for me. All the chemicals, all
Right.
that difficult. So yeah, when we adjust to those things and we become who we're going
Yeah.
to become. But I had to heal that wound of the trauma of being in a body and learn to embrace it, because that's part of remembering who I am. That's part of bringing my gifts through to
Hmm.
be able to celebrate what it's like to be in this density and
Yeah.
really embrace this incarnation. For my higher self chose it for a reason, even if I don't fully know why.
Yeah. I agree. I think for me, it's more like I've always felt like something's missing.
It
And I
is.
feel like, yeah, and it's like my whole life, I'm like, what's this thing I'm missing? Like, it's just like there's something missing, and it's just I don't even know if I'm going to find it, but I always just feel like there's something missing, and I can never put my finger on what it is.
Which keeps you on that journey of remembering,
Yes. Yeah.
right? For
Yeah.
you.
Or
So
maybe
your
it's
higher
this,
self.
maybe it's
Yeah.
that. Yeah. And I've tended to, go here and go there. And then sometimes I go hard, and then sometimes I drift away, and then sometimes I get really into whatever it is. But yeah, I feel like for me, it's always been whatever this thing that's missing. Like, that's the only way I can describe it. It's like I just can't figure out what's missing.
But you see the gift in that, right? That your higher self would
Right.
program and that you would kind of run around with that, and how much that's helped you in your life to
Mhm.
seek. Like, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a gift.
Yeah. I'll have to sit and embrace that, because like right now I'm hearing it like
But it really is a gift.
it,
And when you
it
can look
really
at
is. You're
that,
exactly right. Yeah.
yeah. And you can find how that is such a beautiful
Yes.
gift that helps you build some of that trust too with the higher self that created the parameters, um,
Yes.
and
Which is
created
probably
that
why
part.
I ask so many questions, and why I think very differently than a lot of people do.
Mhm.
Just in even
Exactly.
why we're here, how we're here, what's the purpose, like what is all this stuff, like what's going on, and then
Yeah.
there's that problem solver that wants to come out. And I think lately what I've been balancing is I've been balancing the problem solver in me with the surrender part in me. And
Uh-huh.
sometimes they're like, but we got to solve the problem. Just like, surrender. No, I got to solve the problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that balance, right, of where do I surrender into trust and into the divine, and where can I be part of the solution?
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's, I think, something we're always like when we're on the journey of healing and we're on that journey of trying to be better, we're always kind of sorting that out of like, how much do I give to each?
Yeah. I love that. So how do people work with you? Like, what's it like to work with you? So for those out you are watching that, like, oh my gosh, I really want to work with Michele. So what does it look like working with you?
Oh my gosh, just like I was saying, not one size fits all.
Yes, yes.
Like it can look so
I
many
love.
different ways to work with me. So, if anyone wants to kind of go on that deeper journey of like, where am I stuck? Or where am I from? Or,
Yeah.
why do I want potatoes all the time? Whatever those things, those curiosities are, or if they want, individualized intuitive development, they're like, hey, I'm waking up. I know I'm from somewhere else. I know I have gifts. Like, can you help me to know which direction to go, what to be accessing, how to kind of develop that? So there's so many different things that could look like to work with me. It's so fun. It's my passion. Like I absolutely love helping people to heal in this higher dimensional way.
Mm, I love that. I love that. And then it kind of like leaves it open where it's like you're basically focused, but yeah, you're open to what that individual needs on their own journey.
Yeah, and most people, my schedule is in time increments, 30, 60, or 90 minutes. And I have a question of like, what do you want Michelle to know before your Zoom? And they're like, whatever comes through is fine. So, I mean, and I love the creative freedom of that. Like when I do artwork, I love the creative freedom too. So,
Yeah.
it just to see like and check in and like there's ask the guides like what will come through. And that's kind of what happened today too, is I had no idea what we were going to talk about.
No, we,
I had
yeah.
no agenda of let me, talk about this particular thing. So it's whatever. I love the natural flow of
I
kind of
do
whatever
too.
comes through. And if people don't know what their question is, I'm okay with that.
Mm.
Um, I have no problem with just asking really general questions from the guides, like what is keeping them stuck or what do they need to know for their personal growth. Like there's some very simple questions that I can kind of ask and
No.
tap into that can bring a lot of really helpful information through for them. So, I mean, if you don't know what to ask, I'm fine with that. And I know not a lot of intuitives like that, but I'm fine with that.
But then I think in asking that, you tend to get more specific
Yeah,
because it'll probably
absolutely.
trigger something. So how, and I know you didn't even talk about your art. So tell us a little bit about your art and then how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, so my art, I'm an energy artist, so I make things like, oh, I have some here. Organite pyramids. So for those of you
Beautiful.
that can see, and then I make magic wands. I make all kinds of fun things.
Oh, fun.
Um, and things that are kind of custom to people's energy. So I make custom bracelets,
Mm.
and where I kind of put a shamanic prayer and a knot in between each bead for the person, selecting stones for them based on what they need. So that's kind of the energy art side. And where it can be found is my website, Luminous Ignis, Luminous, Ignis, Ignus.com. And same thing, Facebook, Instagram, I'm on there too. I've got a YouTube page that's kind of getting started. It doesn't have much on it yet. Maybe it will by the time you hear this. There's a few meditations on there that you can get for free. One for energy clearing that could be really great that I would encourage people to kind of check out. And now and then I have events, so you can just kind of check out my page and see if I have a class going on or
Yeah, or
what you're
or anything
needing.
like that. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And just no matter what platform you're listening to this on, all the information will be in the description and the links to reach out to you. So I think we kind of went all over the place today, which I love. So what would you leave people with all this stuff that we've laid out? I mean, we've laid out a lot here. Like what would you leave people with today?
Yeah, I would say really be curious about a lot of things. Like not just questioning things, but being really deeply curious and curious from the heart. Like go into the heart and be curious and find some of your own kind of answers in that or questions, right? Because a lot of times it's about how do I find the right question to ask?
Mm, I would agree. I love that. I love that. Well, oh my gosh, I think we had an amazing conversation. I am so appreciative of your time and coming on and talking with me in this very organic conversation that we have had today. So
Yes.
thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. And thank you for having me. And thank you to everybody that took the time to listen.
Well, and thank you, everyone, for watching yet another episode of The Wealth Within Us. Right now, you can begin aging gracefully, full of energy, vitality, and overall wellness. But as time goes by, our bodies can start to show signs of aging. Until now, introducing LifeWave X39, the world's first product that activates our own cells. This breakthrough in regenerative science helps restore our bodies to a healthier, more youthful state. X39 uses patented phototherapy to elevate a copper peptide that signals cellular activation. Think of it as your internal repair system, generating younger, healthier cells that can rejuvenate your tissues and organs. Just one X39 patch applied daily is all it takes. Safe, non-invasive, and backed by clinical studies, this is your chance to regain control over your vitality. Don't miss out on the future of anti-aging. Experience the power of X39 today. Visit patchedlight.com and start living younger now.